I knew something was off before I even turned onto my road, and that feeling, that quiet little itch in the back of your mind that something isn't right, it doesn't just show up for no reason. At first it was the traffic, which made no sense because my place sits at the far end of a long stretch of road that usually feels half forgotten, like the kind of place GPS barely remembers exists. But that day cars were backed up almost to the main intersection, engines idling, people leaning out their windows looking confused, annoyed, and then I saw it. Bright orange, dead center, like it had been dropped there overnight with full confidence it belonged. A barricade, not a cone, not a temporary sign. A full barricade, concrete blocks on both sides, reflective tape wrapped tight, and right in the middle, a laminated sign zip-tied in place like it had legal authority. No access. Authorized by Brookhaven Estates, HOA. I just stood there for a second, keys still in my hand, trying to make sense of it, like maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe this wasn't actually blocking my driveway, but it was. Completely. Like I didn't exist. Like my house didn't exist. Now here's the thing that made it even crazier. I don't live in Brookhaven Estates. Never have. My house has been sitting there for over 40 years, long before their gated entrance sign, before their matching mailboxes, before the fake stone walls and those decorative street lamps they're so proud of. That road they built their little picture-perfect neighborhood around, it runs right past my property. Always has. And my driveway connects directly to it, because that road was there long before they were. So seeing that sign, seeing their name on it, telling me I couldn't access my own driveway, it didn't just confuse me. It kind of pissed me off in a way that builds slowly, like heat under the surface. I had just gotten back from visiting my sister in Arizona, gone maybe 4 days, nothing dramatic. And in that short window somehow a group of people I don't even belong to decided they had the authority to block access to my home. No phone call, no note, no letter in the mailbox, not even the courtesy of pretending to ask. They just did it. And the worst part was, they did it like they believed they were in the right. I ended up parking about half a mile down the road, right up against a curb already lined with cars I didn't recognize, grabbed my bag, and walked. And I'm not gonna lie, that walk felt longer than it actually was, because every step gave me more time to think about how insane the whole thing was. You start asking yourself questions like, how long has this been here? How many people have seen this? Do they all think I'm just okay with it? And by the time I reached my front door, I wasn't just confused anymore. I was focused. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I found the address for the HOA president, a guy named Daniel Mercer, and drove straight over. His house looked exactly like you'd expect. Spotless lawn, trimmed hedges, one of those flags out front that's more decorative than patriotic. And when he opened the door, he was smiling. Not nervous, not defensive, smiling, like I was there for something casual. "Hey there," he said, leaning against the doorframe like we were neighbors catching up over coffee. I didn't smile back. "You mind explaining why my driveway is blocked?" He didn't even hesitate. Yeah, that, we've been meaning to talk to you." That sentence right there. That's when I knew everything about this situation was going to be exactly what I thought it was. "Talk to me now," I said. He nodded like he appreciated the tone, like this was all reasonable. "We've had some concerns from residents. Increased traffic, delivery trucks, noise, it's been disruptive to the community." I just stared at him for a second. "So you blocked my driveway?" "Well," he said, holding his hands out like he was explaining something obvious. "We implemented a temporary restriction until we can find a more permanent solution." "A restriction?" I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because sometimes something is so ridiculous your brain doesn't know what else to do. "You mean you decided I can't access my own property?" He shook his head gently, still calm, still polite, which somehow made it worse. "You can apply for limited access hours." I blinked. "Apply to use my own driveway. Just until we sort things out," he added, like that softened it. And that was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger, not exactly, more like clarity. Because up until then, I thought this was a misunderstanding, maybe some overreach that could be talked through, but that sentence told me everything I needed to know. They didn't think they were crossing a line. They thought they owned it. So I stopped arguing. Right there on his front step. No raised voice, no threats. I just nodded slowly like I understood, like I accepted it. "Okay," I said. "I'll look into that." He smiled again, relieved, like the problem had just resolved itself. "Appreciate that. We're just trying to keep things safe and maintain property values." Property values, yeah. That word stuck with me the entire drive home. Because here's the part they either didn't know or didn't bother to check. That road they were so protective of, the one with the speed bumps and the landscaping and the little private community signs, it wasn't private. Not officially. Not legally. It was still a county road. Always had been. The original developer, decades ago, never finished the process to convert it, and somehow over the years everyone just assumed. And assumptions like that, they work fine until someone actually checks. I pulled into my makeshift parking spot again, sat there for a minute, looking down that road, watching the barricade in the distance catching sunlight like it was proud of itself, and I remember thinking, if they want to play this game, if they want to talk about rules and authority and who gets to decide what, then fine. We'll play by the rules. I just don't think they understood which rules actually mattered. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, but because once your brain locks onto something like that, it doesn't really let you sleep it off. It just keeps running scenarios, replaying conversations, connecting dots you didn't even realize were there the day before. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about a driveway. This was about control, about a group of people deciding they could quietly redraw boundaries because it made their lives more comfortable. And maybe they'd done it before, maybe with smaller things nobody pushed back on. But this time, they picked the wrong house. I made some coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out an old folder I hadn't touched in years. Property documents, survey maps, permits, the kind of paperwork most people only look at once and then forget exists. But I've always been the type to keep records, not out of paranoia, just habit. And as I spread everything out, piece by piece, it started lining up exactly how I remembered. My property line, the easement, the road designation, all of it pointing to one simple truth. That road wasn't theirs to control. It never had been. By 9 a.m., I was already on my way to the county transportation office, a low, beige building that looks like it hasn't been updated since the late 90s, the kind of place where nothing feels urgent, but things do get done if you know what you're asking for. I walked in with my folder under my arm, took a number, and sat there watching people come and go, contractors, city workers, a couple of confused homeowners like me. And I remember thinking, this is where assumptions go to die. When my number got called, I stepped up and explained the situation as calmly as I could. No exaggeration, no attitude, just facts. There's a road running through a neighborhood. They're treating it like private property, and they've blocked access to my driveway. The woman behind the counter, her name tag said Linda, listened without interrupting, just nodding slightly as she flipped through the documents I handed her. Every now and then she'd pause, look closer at something, then keep going. After a few minutes, she glanced up at me and said, "Yeah, this road is still listed as county maintained." I nodded. That's what I thought. She leaned back a little, thinking, if they never completed the privatization process, they don't have authority to restrict access. There it was. Not dramatic, not loud, just official. So what happens now? I asked. She tapped her pen lightly against the desk. We can file a public access clarification. Once that's processed, any unauthorized restrictions have to be removed. How long does that take? She gave me a look that was almost a small smile. Depends on how complete your paperwork is. I slid the rest of the folder toward her. I brought everything I could find. She flipped through it again, slower this time, more deliberate, and then she nodded once, like she'd made a decision. I'll mark this for expedited review. And just like that, the wheels started turning. I left the office feeling, not triumphant, not yet, but steady, like I'd stepped onto solid ground after realizing the thing I was standing on before wasn't stable at all. And the interesting part is, at that moment, I still wasn't thinking about revenge. I just wanted my driveway back. That was it. Simple. Fair. Done. But then something else clicked later that afternoon. Something small that turned into something much bigger. I got a call from Linda. Your request's been approved, she said. Road is officially confirmed as public. We'll send out notice for removal of unauthorized obstructions. That fast. You had good documentation, she replied. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, you might also want to check how the road is listed in navigation systems. I paused. What do you mean? Well, she said, if people think it's private, it might not be showing as a through street on maps. That can change traffic patterns once it's corrected. And there it was, the second shift. Because up until that moment, This was just about fixing a problem. But suddenly, I realized fixing it completely might create a very different kind of outcome. Not illegal, not even unethical, just accurate. After I hung up, I sat there for a while, letting that idea settle. Thinking about Daniel standing on his porch, talking about property values and community safety, like those words gave him authority over something he didn't own. Thinking about that barricade, about the walk back to my house with my bags, about being told to apply for permission to use my own driveway. And I'll be honest with you, that's when it stopped being just about getting things back to normal. That evening, I made a phone call to a contractor I'd worked with years ago, a guy named Eric who now handled roadway data updates for one of the major navigation systems. Not the kind of thing most people think about, but it matters a lot more than you'd expect. "Hey," I said when he picked up, "random question. How does a road get updated from restricted to public in your system?" He laughed a little. "That's not a random question." "Fair enough." I explained the situation, kept it simple, and there was a pause on the other end before he said, "If it's officially public, and the county confirms it, we can update it. Once it's in, it propagates pretty fast." "How fast?" "Couple days, sometimes sooner." I looked out my window, down toward that road. Quiet, at least for now, controlled, curated, exactly the way they wanted it. "All right," I said. "Let's update it." The next few days were quiet in a different way. The barricade was still there at first, but county notices had been issued, and I could tell something was shifting. A couple of the HOA folks were out more often, walking the street, talking in small groups, probably trying to figure out what was happening behind the scenes. Daniel drove past my place once, slowed down just slightly, like he wanted to say something but didn't. Then, one morning, the barricade was gone. No announcement, no explanation, just gone, like it had never been there. The road looked open again, clean, uninterrupted, and for a brief moment, it almost felt like things were back to normal. But they weren't, because later that same day, new signs started going up. Official ones. White background, black lettering, bolted into the ground with that unmistakable government look. Public through street. No restrictions. One at each end of the road. Clear. Unambiguous. I saw a couple of residents standing nearby, arms crossed, reading the sign like it might change if they stared at it long enough. One of them shook his head slowly, the other pulled out his phone, probably already drafting an email. And then, the maps updated. It didn't happen all at once, not like flipping a switch, but close enough. By the next morning, I started noticing cars I'd never seen before driving through, not stopping, not hesitating, just passing through like they'd always belonged there. Delivery vans first, then rideshares, then regular commuters cutting time off their routes without even realizing the ripple they were part of. By the end of the week, that quiet little road wasn't quiet anymore. It had become something else entirely. And the craziest part, everything happening was completely legal. By the end of that first week, it didn't even feel like the same street anymore. And I don't mean that in some exaggerated, dramatic way. I mean it literally sounded different, looked different, moved different, like the entire rhythm of the place had been rewritten overnight. What used to be this slow, almost staged quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, curated, like everyone agreed to keep things just so, was gone. In its place was movement. Constant movement. It started early in the mornings. Around 6:30, maybe a little before, you'd hear the first wave, commuters figuring out their new shortcut, engines humming, tires rolling over pavement that, up until a few days ago, barely saw that kind of use. Then came the delivery vans, one after another, sliding through like they'd been routed there for years. By mid-morning, rideshares, contractors, people avoiding traffic on the main roads, all of them flowing through without a second thought. And it didn't stop. By afternoon, cars were lining both sides of the street. Perfectly legal, no signs saying otherwise anymore, no HOA rules to lean on. People parked, walked, waited, the kind of normal public road behavior that suddenly felt completely foreign in a place that had convinced itself it was private. I'd sit out on my porch sometimes, coffee in hand, just watching it unfold, not with some cartoon villain satisfaction, but with this quiet, almost surreal awareness that all of this, every single bit of it, came from one assumption being corrected. That's it. No tricks, no loopholes, just the truth, finally applied. But inside Brookhaven Estates, it wasn't quiet anymore. You could feel it in the way people moved, The way conversations stopped when a car passed. The way neighbors who probably used to chat about lawn care and mailbox designs were now standing in tight circles, voices lower, sharper. Complaints started stacking up fast. Noise, traffic, safety concerns, kids not being able to ride bikes the way they used to, school buses now stopping on corners that had never needed them before. Trash pickup had to increase because suddenly there were more people, more use, more everything. And the HOA, they were drowning in it. I heard about it through a guy named Marcus who lives near the entrance. Decent guy. Never really bought into the whole HOA authority thing, but went along with it because it made life easier. He stopped by one afternoon, leaned against my fence, watching a line of cars roll past. Man, he said, shaking his head, they didn't think this through. I took a sip of coffee. No, they didn't. They're getting hammered, he added. Emails, calls, people threatening to move, it's a mess. I nodded slightly, not surprised. Because when you build your sense of control on something that was never actually yours, it only holds until reality shows up. And reality had definitely shown up. It was about a week and a half in when Daniel came back. This time, he didn't knock lightly or stand back with that easy smile. He walked straight up, knocked firm, and when I opened the door, there was no pretending anymore. No friendliness, just tension sitting right under the surface. You did this, he said. Not a question. I leaned against the doorframe, calm. Did what? Don't play dumb. He snapped, gesturing back toward the road where another car passed. You knew what would happen. I let a small pause hang there, just long enough. I followed the law, I said. Isn't that what you wanted? His jaw tightened. For a second, it looked like he was about to argue, to push back, but he didn't, because there wasn't anything to argue. Everything that had happened was clean, documented, approved. This is ruining the neighborhood, he said finally, quieter now, but heavier. I tilted my head slightly. Blocking my driveway wasn't exactly improving it. That landed. You could see it. Not because he agreed, but because he couldn't deny it. There was a long moment where neither of us said anything, just the sound of traffic behind him, steady, unavoidable. Then he exhaled. What do you want? And that question, that's where the balance shifted completely. Because a week ago, I was the one being told what I could and couldn't do. Now he was standing on my porch asking for terms. I didn't answer right away, not to drag it out, but because I wanted it to be clear, this wasn't about winning. It was about fixing what never should have happened. First, I said, you acknowledge what you did. In writing. He nodded once. No argument. Second, you make it clear to every resident that my property is not under HOA authority. No more restrictions, no more assumptions. Another nod, tighter this time. And third, I glanced past him at the road, then back at him. You build a proper sound barrier along my property line. If traffic's going to stay like this, I'm not dealing with the noise you helped create. That one took a second. I could see him calculating it, weighing cost against consequence, but he knew. They didn't have leverage anymore. Fine, he said. Then I'll help you, I added. He frowned slightly. Help us how? I'll file for a traffic calming review, I said. There are legal ways to reduce flow, signage, partial restrictions, things that don't involve pretending the road is private. That was the difference. Not control, structure. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if I was serious, and then, slowly, he nodded. All right. Within a week, everything shifted again. The HOA sent out a formal apology, not overly emotional, but clear enough, acknowledging the misunderstanding and confirming my property rights. The barrier along my driveway? Gone completely, like it had never been there. And construction on the sound wall started not long after, crews working during the day, putting up something solid enough to actually make a difference. And true to my word, I filed the requests. Legitimate ones. The kind that go through review, that consider traffic patterns, safety, impact, not just preference. It didn't erase the traffic completely, but it balanced it, slowed it down, made it manageable. Eventually, the street found a new normal. Not as quiet as before, but not chaos either. Something in between. Something real. And every now and then, I'd still catch Daniel driving by, not stopping, not waving, just passing through like everyone else. Which, in a way, was kind of the point. Because this whole thing, it was never about revenge. At least, not entirely. It was about boundaries. About what happens when people assume authority they don't actually have, and what it takes to remind them where that line really is. But I'll say this, and you can take it however you want. If they had just knocked on my door in the first place, if they had come to me like neighbors instead of acting like they owned the road, none of this would have happened. That street would still be quiet. Their property values, their routines, their peace, all intact. Instead, they pushed. And the only thing I did was push back, using the same rules they thought they were enforcing. So now I'm curious what you think. Were they just trying to protect their neighborhood? Or did they cross a line they had no right to touch? And when someone does that, is it wrong to let the consequences play out exactly the way the law allows? Let me know in the comments, because I've seen people argue both sides of this, and honestly, I get it. But if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that control, real control, doesn't come from assumptions. It comes from knowing exactly where your rights end and someone else's begin.